Spain, despite being a fascist power, did not join the Axis in World War II. Portugal, despite having a borderline fascist dictatorship, still had close relations with Britain, and so didn't join the Axis either. When Adolf Hitler and Francisco Franco went to meet in occupied France, Hitler said that Franco was the worst man he had ever met, which is ironic as Hitler was the very person whom Franco looked up to. But how can we change this? How can we make both Iberian countries join the Axis in World War II? Well, we can do that by giving Franco a brain. This might sound stupid, but Franco believed that everyone should listen to him and no one else, including Adolf Hitler. Which is why, if we make Franco more like Mussolini, in the respect that he thought it was a better idea to work with Hitler, Spain has a higher chance of becoming an Axis power. Changing Franco's personality makes it more likely for Spain to get into the Axis powers, and also increases the relationship between Franco and Hitler. During the Spanish Civil War, Hitler gave his weapons to Franco to help him win the war, and to test them to see if they worked. The support gave them a common enemy and a common goal, which set up the perfect situation for a Spanish German alliance. However, once the Civil War was over, this relationship quickly soured. If we instead carry on this relationship after the Civil War, then it's likely that Spain will join the Axis power. But what about Portugal? How can we make Portugal a proper Axis member? Well, Portugal already has a borderline fascist regime, so what we can do is completely cut off all relations with Britain and make a regime more of an iron fist one, like in Germany. What else can we change? Well, to begin with, Portugal had no relationship with Germany at all. We can easily change that as both of these countries have similar governments, and if Portugal decides to become allies with Germany at about the same time as Spain, then both countries will have some time to arm themselves. There isn't much else that can be changed. After these changes have been made, Portugal will likely proceed to become an Axis minor like Hungary or Romania. Would Spain and Portugal joining the Axis have much of an impact on the war? Well, not really. Spain's civil war ended in 1939 and completely destroyed the country, and Portugal would have had to make sure that would be completely fine while they rebuild and rearm. I will be looking today at two scenarios. The first one being if they do build up forces. This scenario is the most unrealistic one, as the Civil War completely destroyed Spain. There was a famine afterwards, and while they would have had an army, it wouldn't have been as big one as they were fighting off both Republicans and Communists. I don't think for a second that this scenario will work out, as it's more of a perfect scenario for fascist Spain, but I will cover it anyway. It's likely that at the start of the war, Gibraltar would be swiftly captured, as it is essential to capture it for the Spanish survival. It's likely that Spanish and Portuguese forces will also try and break through the Pyrenees into France. However, it's unlikely the major offensive will take place here until France starts falling, as breaking through the Pyrenees is difficult and French forces will have to divert over to the Belgian border, where the Germans are. During the division of France, the Spanish could gain some territory, but it likely won't be anything significant. The entire course of the war could potentially be turned more in favor of the Axis powers, as despite their small size, Portugal had an Irish navy that could be used to try and invade Britain combined with the German navy. However, it's likely that the British would still win the battle for Britain, as Spain and Portugal are just too far away to attack Britain with their own aircraft, nor do they have enough planes. I don't think Operation Barbarossa would be affected in any way, shape, or form, as that operation was mainly a German one. Japan would still do its funny thing in Pearl Harbor, and the US would still join the Allies. However, a campaign into Italy could be made much harder, with Spain and Portugal blockading the Strait of Gibraltar. It's much more likely that a campaign will be forced onto Iberia instead. Meanwhile, the Soviets would have had much more time to push back the Germans, while the Allies find it harder to push into Western Europe. By the time the war ends, it is likely that the Soviets will have pushed all the way up to the Italian border, and we have most of Austria. Spain and Portugal would both be reinstalled as democratic countries. However, Spain may have to cede Catalonia to France as a result of losing the war. At the end of this scenario, we have a stronger Warsaw Pact and a larger East Germany that could actually rival West Germany. Now, we're going to look at the second scenario, where Spain and Portugal refuse to build up their armed forces. This is the much more realistic scenario that a lot of people think would have been the case had this happened. In this scenario, both Spain and Portugal are treated as minor members of the Axis who are incredibly weak and need lots of support. If they both join the war in 1939, there is a potential for a French invasion of Spain as they simply don't have the manpower to keep the front at a stalemate. However, I don't think the invasion will get very far, as when Hitler finds out about this, it's likely he'll either give lots of support or speed up the blitzkrieg invasion of France. In this scenario, Spain gains no territory from France because of their poor performance against the French. It's also more likely that as soon as America joins the war, that an Iberian campaign will start and be incredibly successful. If both Portugal and Spain fall quickly, then the rest of Europe could be liberated much faster by the West, while the Soviets are slowly starting to push back. It's likely that the war could be over by 1943 or 1944 at the latest. In this alternate peace deal, all of Germany is united under the democratic regime, and the same goes for Spain and Portugal. It's also possible that Czechia and Slovenia also end up being democratic, making NATO stronger going to the Cold War. However, that's where this scenario ends. If you've enjoyed the video, consider liking and subscribing, or leaving a comment on what you think could happen afterwards. Goodbye!